This project is a story of revitalization of environmental justice community in Southern California.
And the more relevant story of the community that lives around this facility, because this facility actually has a very interesting history. You can create community. The community thrives if the business thrives, and things can go very well. But as we know, a lot of times industries tend to cycle out. So there's industries that for different pressures are just no longer going to be present in a specific area, or their products are no longer needed, and they may leave the site. And that results leaving a community that either is able to evolve or with their city leaders evolve, or can suffer. And this is really a microcosm of many communities throughout our nation. Well, we have here a solution that we think is going to be really good. What we're going to focus on is really making this happen. How can we help the community evolve instead of suffer? So we close the loop and get back to the large businesses creating employment. So our site is Riverside Cement Company. This is a photo from 1971, given to me by someone who's actually in this picture and still works at the site, the last employee of this era for this site for many, many, many decades, as we're going to see. And it was an important economic engine that actually ended up being the seedling that grew the community. We're going to do an introduction and history of the site, look at the baseline condition. How is it now? Where is it at? And then we're going to take a look at the community. How's the community doing now? And based upon that, then we're going to start looking into the present, moving forward towards the future, the redevelopment plan. And then some of the roadblocks, some of the challenges that implementing this redevelopment plan or getting it approved got in the way, and how we got through them. And then at the end, this redevelopment plan, what are the solutions it's providing to the community? Take a look at the location. This is a little distant, but it shows relative to Southern California where the site is. As you can see, that's area jetting out towards the ocean. For reference, the bottom of that is Long Beach, and this shows Los Angeles. Downtown is kind of up towards the center left. And then this site is out in what's known as the Inland Empire in Riverside County. It is about a 292-acre site in Southern California's Inland Empire, and it has been active since 1906. It went inactive in 2014. For anyone who's ever visited Riverside or the Inland Empire, knows that Riverside is actually quite developed. Well, in the picture in 1906, that mountain that you see behind it is where Riverside is now located. As you can see, there's nothing there. There's the plants, and in the foreground, railroad was actually not initially constructed to take materials out of the plants. It was actually constructed to bring employees to the plants. And then if we look over towards the right-hand side from 1980, satellite image, and it's going to show you just the general outlay. The big rectangle up to the upper right is the material storages area, and that's where they would store either the finished product from the cement process or the raw products, just out in open air in big piles. And as you can imagine, there's fine materials associated with that process. So anytime there is wind, there tend to be dust accumulation, and that happened since 1906. Towards the left of the site is the actual industrial plant, left center, and then down towards the bottom right, you will see a mountain with the shadow, and then some quarries over to the right. One thing of interest, you look to the left of the mountain, it's dry. That changes through the history of the site, as we're about to see. Some history of the site: it was the largest cement producer in the world in several moments of its history. It was the only producer of white cement in the US. The Riverside Cement Company would start building homes around the facility so the workers didn't have to go off so far to get home in the evenings, and thus the beginning of the community. With a couple of major milestones, in the 1980s, the mine flooded. The mine, since it was surface mining until 1927, then they went underground and had different layers going down to get to the limestone, which was being used to create the cement. In the 1980s, it went so low that it penetrated the water table and accessed groundwater, and groundwater flooded up and actually created Crestmore Lake, which we saw in the first image. Then after around 2006, there were accumulation of regulatory pressures that made it so that mining overall, mining and production at the site had to cease. And it held its ground to about 2014, where just due to market pressures, it couldn't withstand anymore, and the site closed in 2014. And we show there the gradual disappearance from the blue area all the way to red, the disappearance of over 500 direct jobs. You can see there's overgrowth. There is some rusting. A lot of the areas are still intact, but non-functional. There's an image of Crestmore Lake, and there's the conveyor belts. You can see the mountain down to the lower left. And these are elements of a site that, you know, seems forgotten. As a community member, you don't necessarily want to be driving by this every day.
This project is the story of thousands of environmental legacy. Manufacturing operation moves out, communities left behind. There's an environmental legacy associated with contamination, given the fact that the community is not only experiencing economic distress, but also have incrementally added environmental burden. The abandoned operation, and you can see the dust on the panel. You will see a little bit of dust coming through. Most of the issues at the site, environmental issues at the site, is waste materials spread throughout the site, heavy metal concentrations, particularly chromium-6, which is a potent carcinogen and has a potential to adversely affect. Why that is important is completely in line with how we look at these projects. Jurupa Valley, from the environmental justice standpoint, has the highest project CalEnviroScreen score, which is 95 to 100%. That's the highest in California, and this project and this region has the highest environmental justice score. Community is pretty much distressed and have very, very significant environmental justice. We really get involved in those. Steve's team and Luis working on it. We're able to kind of turn that thing around. I just want to make sure that audience understand the maximum CalEnviroScreen score means that this community has the maximum pollution burden on them as a result of the discontinuation of operation of mining. What that really means, mostly this Jurupa Valley is minority community, got 95 to 100% score in environmental justice. Now, why is it so important for us to actually work on these projects, get excited about it, to get this project to consummation? Well, our strategic plan calls out for, making sure that the project that we work on and are highly environmental justice issues, and also focuses on revitalization of communities. And this fulfills both objectives in our strategic plan. It talks about why environmental justice is one of the top priority for the department. On the left-hand side, you can see the population growth at Jurupa Valley is actually pretty much in line with the national average. And if you look at the right-hand side, right-hand panel actually tells you almost greater than actually 2/3 of the population of Jurupa Valley is actually minority. Almost 62,000 out of 97,000 population is basically Hispanic. So fits with the environmental justice objective that we have. As you can see on the left-hand side, it talks about the per capita income for Jurupa Valley, Riverside County, and state of California. As you can see, per capita income is way below the state average, and it's also way below the Riverside County average. Look at the poverty level. The left panel on the bottom row, it says persons below the poverty level. 16.1% is definitely higher than the state and the Riverside counties. That's why it's considered not only from the population composition standpoint, but also from the income standpoint. And if the right-hand side panel is basically shows you number of jobs in this community. It's a great time to talk about what the projects bring to the table.
So now I want to share the vision of our client, Viridian Partners, who really took the lead on this and saw an opportunity to create something valuable for this community. And if we look over to the left, you still identify the material storage area. Up to the upper right of the facility, you see Crest. And these are 6 buildings that are not of small dimensions. The largest is 1.2, 1.4 million square feet. And these are buildings that are now becoming very desirable to major players in e-commerce. Organizations that are looking to get their shipments out from the ports that are coming from all over the world, get them to an area where they have a big enough warehouse structure so that they can sort them out and then repackage them and get them off to their next destination warehouse or clients throughout the United States. And as you can see, these 6 buildings exclude the Crestmore Lake area and everything to the south that's actually going to remain open space. from a preservation perspective, I think over 30% of the land is actually not going to be developed. It's going to be either dedicated to open space, or it's going to be dedicated to the greenery and the trees. Don't see a ton of buildings all one on top of the other, but spaced out appropriately, and a very good plan. To Viridian, it was very important that from the roadways, you got a sense of nature. So there was a landscaping plan and landscaping requirements, and they went above and beyond the requirements and added additional trees, additional shrubs, so that from the roadways, the community really got a sense of connection with nature. And as you can see, the buildings are very pleasant. Significant difference from the pictures that we saw just a few slides ago, and see some of the aesthetic benefits of the redevelopment. A significant change in use in California. This did have to go through an environmental impact report. You have to actually evaluate alternatives and see the alternatives and see how this measures up to make sure that there's really a net benefit to other options that exist for the use of the land. And here we've got 4 other ones that we're not going to get into great detail on, but there's the existing general plan, and there's even the no development. There's the plan of not doing anything with the facility. And you can see different aspects. And yeah, when you talk about a logistics center, there's going to be some traffic going on because you're moving a lot of merchandise around, and you can see daily vehicle trips. But what's of interest is that number is actually quite a bit less than the existing general plan. So if the general plan were implemented, there would actually be greater traffic. Even so, Viridian did note, and through the EIR process, the city noted the increase in vehicle trips. And as part of the development plan, there's significant investments in infrastructure improvements, including adding lanes to some of the surrounding streets to offset some of those impacts. See the bottom 2 rows is remediation of the site, yes, where the others, no. So the developer here, Viridian, there is funding associated with remediation of the sites. So that is what's going to help get this moving forward. There is the dedication of community benefits.
So we get involved, and primary goal that we had in the project is to make sure the site is properly investigated and then remediated. And that's what our major goal was. So we completed our investigation back in 2019, and we approved the remediation plan, which we call a response plan, and last year as well. Of course, the activities, this is kind of very unique project for us, because the response plan is not just simple remediation. It actually talks about not only remediation, but cut and fill, right? Cut and fill, demolition and abatement, and there are areas that are not accessible, and until the cut and fill takes place, those areas need to be evaluated. So we had to be very flexible with the project proponent to ensure that not only the goals of our response plans are met, but also the flexibility that was necessary because of the physical feature of the property are also fulfilled at the same time. And overall, the whole project, while this is being remediated, is protective of public health and environment. We also have to make sure that the health and safety of the worker is taken into consideration. Of course, health and safety plan, which we normally do not approve. In this case, we actually had a very comprehensive review of the health and safety plan and ensure that the worker safety is actually guaranteed. The procedures are in place to ensure that worker safety is, the exposure to chromium-6 and other metals is minimized. We did also were involved in the demolition, because this project requires significant demolition, which means that there's going to be a lot of lead and asbestos abatement. And so we actually took a very detailed view of this demolition plan and realized that there is a lot of asbestos abatement involved in it. So we want to make sure that worker safety specific to those elements of those activities, those demolition activities, are addressed through the regulatory compliance built into the demolition plan. So that's what we did, for not only for the worker protection, but also for the long-term protection, ensuring that there is air monitoring, perimeter air monitoring in place to ensure the communities are not impacted from the remediation activities and cut and fill activities. When I became a project manager in 2019, it was a big challenge for me, because I have not been involved in cut and fill types of project a lot, and I have not been involved in demolition and abatement a lot. Even though recently in the last 2 years I have been, but it's not to the level that this project entails. So when we were reviewing the project, the first thing I noticed is that the department team had about, I don't know, 60 to 70 comments. And the project, I realized on the fast track. Steve said, Rafat, we need your help to get this thing going. And I said, okay, we got to get something, we got to figure out what we need to do. And what I did is I asked Luis and Steve if we can basically get in a room and talk through these comments and resolve these comments in a day. When I talked to my team about this type of meeting, they were laughing at me, but I said, no, we're going to sit down with Langan and with Steve and deal with it. So that's what we did. We locked ourselves in the room in the morning, and we didn't probably get out until like, what, 4:30 in the afternoon, I think, Luis? Is that correct?
Yeah, it's about right.
Yeah, so we kind of worked through those comments and finalized the remediation site investigation report and the remediation report.
Explaining a bit this slide, you'll see 4 arrows in red going in separate directions. And a lot of times we'll feel that that's how projects go, where you've got a regulator going one way and the developer wants to go the other way. The developer's trying to get their project done, feeling that the regulator's taking up too much time and wants too many things and everything. And then the community wants something in the whole other direction. And then the consultant's trying to make a dissertation out of all studies. So that it's not good. And we see this all too often when we get together and align more like the 4 blue arrows coming together and having a shared vision. That's where success lies. And what Rafat did there in some of the creative approaches to make us move forward really drove that. It was really looking at each other then and saying, we really have to get this done. We have a common goal. We got through a response plan at a very large site that the response plan had a public comment period and received no comments. If you can think about that and imagine the level of rigor and the quality of the document to have gone through that and received no comments was quite notable, and it's notable to Rafat and his team over at DTSC. And at the end, I just want to say, this really was about kind of operating as a public-private partnership style relationship.
Part of the struggle that a lot of developers have doing these types of projects is getting the regulators and the other stakeholders out there all aligned and try to get to the common goal that Luis was talking about. That is our struggle on our projects. As Luis takes you through this and Rafat takes you through this, this was a great success story. And we're very, very, very pleased with the result. And as Luis will probably tell you, as we keep going here, we're planning on breaking ground here very quickly.
And of course, the DTSC process was just one part of it. It's really about creating support. And in the center of everything is the community. We think that this is a good thing. Does the community believe that as well? And that's what's important. And we saw tremendous support from this in the different meetings that the project proposal went through. From the Planning Commission, who the Planning Commission, they did see some of the impacts related to traffic and some of the mitigation measures, but they saw this as a net improvement, as a great improvement for this site, and they unanimously, voted in approval for this. And then it went on to City Council, and City Council also decided that this was in the better interest of their constituents and the residents of their community, and approved it as well. And of course, we did go through the CEQA process, and that was led by the City of Jurupa Valley, a very well done document that went through a comment period, and they did receive comments, and the City of Jurupa Valley also made sure that all comments were addressed. So a very transparent and engaging process to make sure that this was good. Just drawing again on, we are taking a community that went through an economic boom that has since cycled out and trying to help them jump back into the new cycle. And as you can see here in the circle, we're circled Long Beach. That is the Port of Long Beach and the Port of Los Angeles that are right in their neighbors. And together they're the largest port structure in the United States. And I believe one of the top 5 in the world. And as e-commerce continues to occur and we get more goods coming in from offshore, that is going to continue to grow. In fact, Port of Los Angeles last month had its best month in its 100-year history. We go over to the site that you can see in the small orange circle. That is relatively close to the ports, but in a part of Southern California where the price of square foot is still relatively reasonable to other areas closer to the ports, but yet connected through all the highways. And then the two highways that are highlighted that form kind of a cross, well, the one going north-south, that's the 15, Interstate 15, and the one going east-west is Interstate 10, both of which I think we will recognize as extremely significant throughways for the nation and for commerce. And as we can see in the bottom, this project includes $25 million in transportation improvements and fees, including, as we had mentioned previously, extending lanes in some of the roadways, traffic signals, pedestrian crossways, just general good traffic design for the area. The site also has all of the top sustainability solutions, as we spoke about, the landscaping planning going above and beyond on the trees, and also making sure that as the site as a location becomes ready for renewable energy sources, that the future tenants of these sites will have access to that will all be constructed and ready to go when they're ready to make the installations and get that going. So it's just a good design for these buildings that will be occupying the lot. And now, of course, we have to speak about the important point, because we talked about the 500 lost jobs from the cement plant. Well, this project is going to bring back permanent jobs in the logistics and manufacturing, not talking about the construction, more than 1,000. And if we recall back to a slide that Rafat presented, I believe that total employment in Jurupa Valley was somewhere around 30,000. So 1,000 new jobs is a significant impact to this community. And there's going to be a first source employment job fair where there's going to be a focus on hiring from the local community. And then job quality. I mean, starting wage is decent for the skill set that is needed, but with a few years of experience, the people working here can start earning a number that is significantly above the average salaries that has been seen in this area previously. So this is some of the socioeconomic impact. And here what we really want to say is, if you look at the educational breakdown, there is actually a good match. A lot of the residents here do not have advanced degrees or do not have college degrees, but the jobs we're bringing here are a good match for that when you're talking about industrial warehouse jobs. Whereas if you had another type of employment, maybe something more advanced, you might get gentrification where you're getting replacement of the community. These jobs are well suited to the local community, and therefore it will support the continued growth and sustenance of the community. And then the image is hard to see, but it is the major employers of Jurupa Valley, and of course the top is the Unified School District. At the end of the day, Agua Manza Commerce Park in our projections would be the number 2 employer, the net employments created by all of the tenants at the facility. So again, wrapping it up, why should we care? We're going to remediate the location that is contaminated. We're preserving areas. We're revitalizing the community. We're providing solutions as well to the community. Here are some of the significant investments that are being made and the jobs that are being created for this community to really help it make that jump back into having a site by them that is a significant producer of quality employment. And that's a win-win-win-win. Developer, regulator, constructions, community, we're all reaching our goals. I'm very privileged to present you all to Ms. Susie Kim, who is a senior associate at RSG, a California-based community development consulting firm.
I work with RSG, and we work with cities and counties throughout California on community development projects. And one of the things we do is help dispose of properties that were purchased by cities, usually by their former redevelopment agency, to redevelop. And then when redevelopment went away, all these cities have leftover sites that they're required to dispose of within the next few years. And one of them actually is in Irwindale, who has several mining pits. And it seems like such a monumental task to remediate and fill these mining pits. And I was curious how you made this project pencil for you, and if you have any recommended financing sources.
Thank you, Susie. Yeah, I'd say quickly from my perspective, I think I'd invite Steve on the numbers for this project, and Rafat as well. And there's certainly, when you look at some of the mining pits, they're extensive and they're significant. But as you look at the potential growth of these areas, and I know Irwindale pretty well, I live relatively close to it. These are areas that are going to be a significant part of a growing booming future for Southern California and for our nation in general, but definitely in Southern California, as e-commerce is going to continue to grow and look for space that's large enough to accommodate their needs. And I think that those mining properties accomplish that, though there can be large earthwork projects. So Steve, you want to talk a bit about, how this pencils in?
Yeah, I think, the challenge for all the projects we do, Viridian is a company that basically specializes in buying environmentally distressed properties and repositioning them. And the trick to doing that is to making sure that you've got an end use that can create the economic cycle, can create the rents, can create the real estate values that can obviously justify the cleanup costs. Right now, with the way that the market is going, industrial warehouse development is growing, rents are growing every day, real estate values are growing every day. And so it's a solution that basically creates the real estate value that at the end of the day justifies the cleanup costs and everything else. We're a little unique in our company is that we don't take public funds to do these types of projects with our own funds and banking. So, we need to make sure that these projects can pencil. And so really for us, the success in these things is creating that value at the end of the day, both from a real estate and from an economic engine standpoint that makes sense for both the community and makes sense for us as a developer. And quite frankly, the COVID crisis, as bad as it is actually accelerating that even further. More people are shopping from home. The need for e-commerce is even becoming greater. So that really is the secret to our success, is being able to get those end uses out there that can create the revenue and create the real estate value that justifies the cleanup costs.
Great. Well, thank you. That's really interesting. I'm glad you brought up COVID, because one of our concerns in helping cities dispose of properties is that a lot of investors seem to be hesitant to invest in new development and new properties right now. And I wanted to talk about one site that's pretty representative of the properties that we're helping cities sell. And what we have on the screen now is a site that's in a suburban East Bay community in the Bay Area. And it's about 5,000, there are two 5,000 square foot lots, and they're both developed with mixed use residential commercial properties. And the city would really like to redevelop these into a vibrant placemaking opportunity for their downtown core, which has a lot of history, but there isn't a lot of sense of place there right now. So the first lot has a 2,200 square foot building that was built in 1945. And the front has a small commercial restaurant space, which is usable with minor tenant improvements. And then the rear has a residential unit that's attached, along with a one-car garage that also has another residential unit on top. But the residential portions would likely have to be demolished and not rehabilitated. So the next lot has about a 3,200 square foot building, which I believe historically was a residential use, but eventually became mixed use commercial residential. And the bottom level used to have a bar, and then the second level was used for apartments. And as you can see from these pictures, it's pretty dilapidated and requires significant renovation inside. And then, so the two lots highlighted in yellow are the ones currently owned by the city. And then there's another lot right next door that's owned by a utility company that might be willing to sell their site. And so the challenges with these lots are that they're pretty small infill opportunities. And one of our concerns, again, as I mentioned, is whether or not there'll be a lot of interest in investing in sites like these due to the economic fallout from COVID. So I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts and recommendations are to develop these sites.
You have to follow where the economy is really going. And as much as there is a new demand here, I think for these large warehouses that we highlighted in the project that we presented, there's also significant needs for smaller lots, especially if they're close to a downtown corridor. Even just thinking of within the e-commerce, there are needs, for last mile. There's the huge warehouses that do all the sorting, but then there's needs for smaller warehouses in areas that are closer to the final client. As we've all seen, a lot of these retailers are now not just trying to get things to you in 2 days. Some of them are trying to get you stuff in 2 hours. So that means that you have to be very nearby. So that's one idea. But there's also a lot of changes going on, and having it as close as to the downtown corridor in shared spaces and in the way that people are also, for example, preparing food. You said that one, I believe, had a bar or a restaurant associated to it, so it might even have the permits to do so. But there's also a lot of delivery services now that are prepping food nearby, and those are other ideas that I think as you start to look to help the city how they can market this. It's maybe investing a bit in developing some of these concepts and going out to the market and saying, hey, look, you can do this at this facility and we're going to help you along. And I think it's taken from the slide where we talked about how Rafat helped us all have a shared vision and coming together is, when the city's reaching out to developers and say, look, we have these ideas and we're going to help you through the permitting process and everything. That's where you start getting some interest. And you've given some ideas to what the future economy is looking like.
Yeah, I like the idea of food delivery and prep, because that would work in these spaces pretty well. And also, I was wondering how far ahead you think the city should look in marketing these properties. And would you recommend hanging on and not putting them on the market right away and waiting to see how things recover with the economy, or just put them on the market now and then see what kind of offers they receive?
In the COVID environment that we're in now, especially with these smaller type of infill sites, it's tough to develop these sites because I think, as you were saying, Susie, people are nervous. A lot of the uses that cities traditionally like for sites like this, whether it be retail, mixed use, residential retail, that kind of stuff, those aren't thriving markets right now. We're looking at a lot of old retail sites around the country right now, including regional malls that people want to tear down. A lot of the uses that are traditionally liked by cities and communities to go in these areas really aren't thriving right now. I think you need to get creative if you are going to hold on to them and think out of the box and think differently, and see if those types of uses can fit in. Whether they are, like Luis was saying, food prep, recession-proof type businesses. Or whether it's, even pickup facilities for Amazon or something like that, for that kind of stuff. That's the way that's where the world is moving to. So, in a downtown community like this, you really need to start thinking differently if you want to get developers and investors interested, especially, obviously, in the environment that we're living in right now.
And we also have some clients who have former Air Force bases or airports that have closed down in the Sacramento area, also in the Inland Empire area. What are some of the challenges that you've dealt with dealing with abandoned airports and their redevelopment?
We haven't redeveloped an airport yet, but I don't look at it as being much different than the project that Luis presented to you that we did. Obviously there's going to be environmental challenges with an airport. There's going to be, especially with an airport that's been abandoned, there's going to be ecology and wildlife challenges, all the stuff that evolves over the years as they're sitting there. But if these are in the types of areas that you're talking about, Inland Empire or close to urban centers, I would think that there's probably a tremendous ability to look at these as potential warehouse developments for the future, because like we've been talking about, that is a use out there that is thriving, and but it's also a use that is frowned upon by a lot of communities. But if you have a project like these where there were previous environmental conditions, being an airport, whether it was air quality or whatever, the ability to get a community to come around to doing warehouse can be a little bit easier, because you're basically solving a problem. And Luis has said it before, you had a use there that was tough, had environmental issues, created environmental impacts. You're having a new use that does the same thing, but is that creating a better solution? And that is the key to the equation, is being able to convince the communities and, and all the stakeholders that this is a better solution.
Yeah, and I can say, Steve, that I haven't redeveloped an airport, Susie, but I have done a lot of work around airports, environmental work, and yeah, there is an environmental component. You definitely have to look and see what soil conditions are, groundwater. If groundwater is impacted, it adds a level of complexity. So it's really about understanding the environmental component. If they're strategically located, someone eventually is going to want to make the investment to manage those issues and get the site redeveloped. And as crazy as it sounds, and I know that this is probably somewhat controversial for a lot of people, but we know that there's also a lot of companies working on drones and drone delivery. And the question starts to pop up, well, if you have airspace associated with an airport, would that facilitate that? Would that be a potential asset for someone looking to develop some kind of a distribution center that's drone based? It's kind of, taking those ideas that we're really starting to see are where the economy is trending in the next 5 to 10 years and even beyond, and starting to evaluate, all right, is this a problem? And if it's a problem, is it so significant that someone's not going to invest in it? And then also, well, look at this. We have this airspace, or we have this other feature. Is it a problem? Is it a liability, or is it an asset? Is it actually something that can be interesting to people? And take it from there and start going out to the market and see if there's interest.
I think I have worked on a lot of military bases around California where they have been converted, redeveloped, essentially. And the legacy costs associated with airport operations, because all of these bases have airports, right, on their premises. There are a lot of hidden costs associated with it unless you have done a very thorough due diligence on them. There's a lot hidden based on what you have. For example, underground storage tanks been operated for maybe hundreds of years, right? They have been around for since 30s and 20s, and those kinds of legacies have a lot of hidden costs associated with it. That really, and I know Steve can probably speak to it. That what it does is that creates a lot of uncertainty and increases the risk and reduces the ROI on those projects. So you gotta have to weigh it out and see what kind of environmental legacies you can reasonably expect from these properties, and what would it take to really remediate it or be. And it's all about geography, where these sites are located. I mean, they're located out of nowhere, right? Then I think the legacy costs environmental legacy costs are really, really less as compared to something closer to the area where there is very, very high foot traffic or located in the urban areas. That could create a lot of problems.
All right, well, thank you everyone for the panel discussion. It's been very, very engaging. I do have one more question I'd like to ask each panel member. Rafat, you've been very engaged in not only the sites we talked about in the panel, but obviously the site we presented. So in as much as you see the site, the impact it's having on the community, how do you think it helps contribute to the resiliency of a community? How does it help make a community stronger, so that as these unknowns and these variables that occur to us, year after year? I mean, if you think about what we thought in February that 2020 was going to be like, and look at it now, how do you think that your experience and that project is helping a community become more resilient?
I think one of the things that I would like to emphasize is that the department has a very comprehensive public engagement strategy. Every project that comes in, that the department actually ensures that the public involvement is basically takes place on each project. This project is very unique, and I think one of the things that makes this very successful is because Steve has actually gone an extra mile in engaging the local community activists, right? And he's been able to talk to them, have a dialogue with them. And I think that provides a wonderful conduit. And beside the institutional conduit, which we are, right? That conduit is incredibly essential, because what it does, it makes our job a lot easier and creates a dialogue with the community directly, and the community feels that they're actually participating in the decision-making process. And I think that leads to resilience within the community, because they feel that every decision that the project team is making or a developer is making, they're part of it. And I think not only from the institutional side, which we are, I think from the private sector side, reaching out to the community activists, finding conduit to have a dialogue early on and hear them and be very, very conscientious about it. I think it provides that conduit and leads to the resiliency in the community. And that's what I think. In my experience, for probably about 25 years, that I've been involved. And I think institutional side depends on how the people outside, the external stakeholders, really position themselves with the community. Because no matter what we say, the belief has to come from the direct interaction with the project proponent. And I think that's what Steve has done here. And that's what I have learned, at least when working on this project.
Great, thank you, Rafat. Very insightful. Susie, you've shared a couple of sites with us in some slides and presentation. Thank you for that. And you've also mentioned some others that are at different scales, from the smaller site shared, but also the mine sites in Irwindale. We spoke about airports and whatnot. What do you think are some of the key elements of a redevelopment project that really help drive the resiliency of the community and make it so it's beneficial to the community?
Yeah, I think cities are uniquely positioned to keep the community's best interests in mind. So a lot of the cities we're representing to sell sites, we're not just trying to get top dollar for a site regardless of what the use is. We're really trying to reach out to developers who will develop uses that will help contribute to a city's growth and community development, and with the community's interests and needs in mind. So I think that cities may not always have a lot of money to do this, but it does have the ability to coordinate with different parties and to connect private developers with the public and different agencies to build a good project.
Great, thank you, Susie. And Steve, I've had the opportunity many times in different meetings to hear firsthand you and your partners talk about your interaction with the community, about doing the right thing. We spoke briefly in the presentation about air filtration systems and how it was recommended by the Planning Commission, and your partners, you just looked at each other and said, it's the right thing to do, and just did it on the spot. Can you tell us a bit about your values, you yourself and Viridians, about being cognizant of the community and being aware of what's going to help them and make them more resilient?
Luis, you hit on that. That's a very important thing, because I think a lot of developers out there, tend to shy away from the environmental justice groups and the different stakeholders that are there, and try to find ways around it. And really the way to work through these projects and to get them done is to actually reach out to those people and figure out what their interests are. On our project, there was obviously a lot of concern over air quality, both existing conditions and the conditions that we be created by our trucks and traffic. So we instituted and worked with the environmental justice stakeholders out there to put in air quality units into about, I can't remember, close to 500 households in the surrounding area. And for a project of this scale, this is a 4 million square foot development, in the half $500 million range, real estate value. Doing those kinds of things, which might be $500,000 investment in the community, are small things to us that create a lot of goodwill. Get the community, people, and and stakeholders knowing that you are interested in them and their long-term interests, because these uses that usually, as we were talking about, wind up working economically for these sites aren't always the ones that everybody wants. And so in order to make it work, you really need to do that. You need to do that reach out, and you need to be integral with all those people, and that's where the success is. And then also to pat Rafat on the back a little bit, is to make sure too that the regulators that you're working with know that you're vested as well, and that you are trying to do the right thing, and at the same time trying to do the right thing, trying to come up with pragmatic solutions. And a lot of regulators out there don't necessarily like pragmatic solutions, and I think Rafat and the DTSC, through our help with Luis, were able to kind of see through that and understand that in order to make a project like this successful, you need to make sure it's cleaned up and done in the right way, but you also need to find the right path of getting there, and making sure that it works well.
Great, thank you, Steve. To close, I want to thank all of our panel members for taking the time out to share your insights with us, share some great discussion. And to my co-presenter, Rafat, thank you as well for your time. It's been a pleasure, and I hope that everyone listening found this valuable. Thank you very much.